Hello and welcome to another My ND/NT marriage video. I wanted to talk about the traits of people who are on the spectrum. And the reason I want to do this is because what I'm noticing in all of my research and such is that they're so varied. So when I first found out that my husband was on the spectrum, as I've said before, I thought all neurodiverse people were aggro and just constantly yelling at partners and putting them down and insulting them and critiquing and being awful. And then I spoke to others whose husbands aren't like that. And then when I did speak to a number of people, a lot of them had these situations where their husbands are goners, as I like to call them. Goners are people who are gonna do that and gonna do this and gonna get to that and etc. And they all had these husbands who were really messy and start jobs and don't finish and financially terrible, can't work, quit jobs, high anxiety, depression, all these different things that my husband didn't have. And I was thinking, maybe my husband isn't on the spectrum after all, because he's just almost a workaholic. He just goes to work and gets the job done. And he doesn't start projects and not finish them, in the sense that he doesn't start really big projects. He might do the odd sort of small unfinished thing, but nothing really significant. And he's not sloth, he's the opposite of sloth. And he's good with money, and he actually spends time with the children, and he talks. And that's another thing a lot of people say. They're with somebody on the spectrum who barely speaks. You know, you might get a grunt or a groan per day sort of thing. But then you also get people who say that their neurodiverse partner will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about their special interest. Again, my husband's not like that either. He's not talking a whack ton. And he's not hardly talking. He just makes general chit-chat here and there, and we just have these sort of basic general conversations. So I started to get a little bit confused. And then I did all this research and started to come up with findings. And the reason I wanted to share this now is because obviously there's a lot of newbies out there. Newbies meaning either you've just found out your partner is on the spectrum, or you're new to the relationship with somebody on the spectrum. And they're asking the same things, wondering the same things. Maybe my partner isn't on the spectrum because he's not doing that thing. Or maybe he's not on the spectrum because he's not doing that thing. So I won't go into a massive waffle on about all of the differences, because there's many. I will leave a list on the description for the video. But things like, some of them are financially controlling. Neurotypicals can be financially controlling as well. Or some of them may be physically or verbally abusive. And when I say them, I mean a neurodiverse. But neurotypicals obviously are those things as well. So it's not that if your partner is financially controlling, it's most likely that they're on the spectrum. Anybody can be financially controlling, and anybody can be financially loose. Some people just spend money they don't have and get themselves in all manner of debt, whether they're on the spectrum or not. So I think that there are certain traits that are the main focus, regardless of your neurodiverse's personality type. And that's really what it comes down to, is their personality type and how they were raised. My husband was raised in a very neat house with very high expectations of him being very good, well behaved, good at school, high achiever, and neat. So he had those high expectations, goes into a relationship and brings those high expectations with him. Had he lived with somebody who mothered him, and as I say that, it's kind of funny because if you had them, that was a tongue twister. If you have a mother, they're going to mother you. But that's not what I mean. I mean a mother who does too much mothering, like smothering. They do all your washing for you even when you're a teenager, and they do all the cooking, and they never teach you to cook, and that kind of mothering, where they don't actually grow you into a functioning adult. They grow you into a, dare I say, man-child, but I dare say there's women-childs as well. Just made that word up. But yeah, so you could end up with somebody who's on the spectrum who just cannot look after themselves because they were never taught. And so that's what I'm saying. It's all about upbringings. If you have parents who didn't teach you to be financially savvy, you won't know how to be financially savvy. If you had parents who are abusive, you may be abusive. You may stop the cycle. You may continue the cycle. It all depends on your personality, etc., etc., etc. So, common traits, let's talk about those. Being self-aware seems to be something that neurodiverse struggle with. Again, it's not something that can't necessarily be taught, and perhaps if you learn that you're on the spectrum in your younger years, you may learn it easier than somebody who is older and their neurons and such are already set. But they also tend to struggle with their sense of self, their own thoughts and feelings, putting those thoughts and feelings into words, understanding what thought or feeling that they're having, understanding what their partner's thoughts and feelings may be, because again, you can only guess. When you're with somebody, you would read their facial expressions and their body language and make a determination about what you think that they're feeling. So somebody on the spectrum would struggle with that. You would have to be really clear and say, I'm feeling X, Y, Z. So that seems to be one sort of common trait, the lack of understanding of thoughts and feelings, the lack of being able to verbalize those thoughts and feelings. Eye contact, that tends to be a common trait that they all share. They either avoid it or sometimes they'll stare a lot because they're trying to not be the person who avoids eye contact. My husband is an eye contact avoider. When I talk with him, he will usually look away and stuff like this, and I have found even within myself, I do that with others now, something that I sort of maybe have picked up from him. When we're talking with each other, we will quite often be facing different directions. So he'll be facing that way and I'm facing this way. So as in, we're not looking at each other, if you understand what I'm saying. We'll just not be facing each other. And he doesn't mirror my body language, which is absolutely fascinating. When you're neurotypical and you're talking with another neurotypical, generally speaking, if you cross your arms, they'll cross their arms. If you stand a specific way, they'll stand a specific way. My husband does not mirror body language, and I would say that that has to do with their lack of perception about body language. That being said, I would be really curious to know if there are others out there who have noticed the same thing with their partner. And so obviously I've touched there on the facial expressions and body language and their inability to tell that sort of thing. I mean, obviously they can tell the obvious. If you've got a frown on your face and your arms are crossed, they may know that you're angry. They'll not necessarily know why or how or whatever. Like most people, they'll probably be thinking, uh-oh, what did I do now? But they won't necessarily know unless you tell them. And they may not even care. They may see that you're angry and go, if they're going to tell me what's the matter with them, we can talk about it, and if not, doesn't matter. But chances are they're not actually going to want to know why you're angry. Generally speaking, I'm not sure that it would matter to them that much. From what I've read around town, it seems to be something that a lot of them avoid, as in talking about like issues, for example. And so if you're angry, that means there's an issue, and they're not exactly going to want to have that conversation. So for the most part, My husband, if you met him, you wouldn't really know that he's on any spectrum whatsoever. He just comes across as normal. He doesn't mind socialising. He doesn't do it very often, but he's fine when he's there. He's just like the life of the party, having a ball and mingling. He doesn't seem to have any kind of issues whatsoever. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of quirks. I haven't seen him stim before. The only thing that I've noticed is that his dad, him and our son, who's also on the spectrum, curl their toes under, which I find interesting. They'll just be sitting and watching telly or something and they'll just randomly curl their toes under. It's something all three of them do. My son does stim a little bit, but I've never really noticed that hubby does it. So for the most part, you wouldn't know by looking at him or interacting with him that he's possibly autistic. It's not until you're in a relationship with him and I might try to discuss something and I notice that he's just not quite capable of doing it. So let's think of an example. Let's say I wanted to talk to him about Aboriginal affairs and all of the issues that they face, their past trauma, healing from that trauma, the continued racism that they face now, how could we better their lives, that kind of stuff. Let's imagine that I was going to talk to him about that. He would be lost after the first sentence. He may have a bit of input here or there, but it wouldn't be like he could have a half-hour conversation about it and really get into the nitty-gritties of the hows and whats and wherefores. So that's the sort of thing that he will struggle with. If I wanted to talk to him about sport, he could talk to me about that for hours. He could tell me how the scores work, how the hits work, all of the moves, what they're called, all of that kind of stuff. And he's quite knowledgeable in that kind of thing, but he wouldn't be able to talk about Aboriginal affairs because firstly it's not something that he's ever probably looked into and is knowledgeable on, but also it's about psychology and that's complicated. So that's kind of where I can tell that he's on the spectrum. If I raise a specific subject, he might have one or two things to say about it and then just drop the subject. And there's a lot of subjects that I find that happens with. And that's where I can see that his inability to process the thoughts of language in his mind. It's not that he's not clever and doesn't know language, but you can just see that he struggles with concepts, I guess, that he's not thought about before. You know, the neuro connections aren't quite there sort of thing. It's really interesting to just watch, like the physical him. If you have this kind of conversation, he'll almost like go blank. And it's not that he's not there, it's just that he struggles to form a sentence. Yeah, form a thought about that particular topic. Anyway, as I said, I'll list below my sort of thoughts and findings and you can tell me if you would agree or disagree. What would you add to the list? Do you think that it'll be broken into top and bottom lists? Do you think that there are things from the top list that should go in the bottom list? Let me know your thoughts. And randomly, I hope you find this video was interesting. I feel like I was a bit around and round off topic. But feel free to comment below. Love to hear from you. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video.